Everyone, it's Nathas, and today I'm going to be opening a Kickstarter starter kit from SolForge Fusion. So I have a Kickstarter starter kit that I have sealed here, and today I'm going to be opening it to see if I could get anything good. So right now, I've actually been searching for decks for Worlds. I'm debating what I'm going to play, so I've been trying to open up a little bit more product to see if I could open anything fun that I might be able to kind of fuse with one of the decks that I'm looking for. I know out of the Kickstarter kit or set and alpha, I'm always looking for something like Shambling Shambler, some good Dark Heart decks, some Blight Witch decks, things like that. So, cards that you can't really find in set two. It's always fun to kind of go back and open set one cards to see if you could get any of those exclusives. So yeah, and I was able to get my hands on a couple Kickstarter starters, so I'll probably be doing a few openings in the near future. Um, all right. So I'm not going to open up this little package, but this has all your Kickstarter minions in it. So your Kickstarter starters come with your Kickstarter style life counters. I have one of them over here, so I can pull it out without opening the bag. But you'll have you put it under your card as you go, and it's supposed to tell you +3 health, +4 health, and so on. They're a little clunky to use, which is why I think they changed the design when they moved from Kickstarter to Alpha. But it has those as well as a subset of minions. You have one of each Kickstarter minion, as well as one of, or two of each regular minion. So that's what comes in this little package. Um, I know in a couple of my other videos I've opened some demo kits as well as some Kickstarter kits. So if you want to see what the Kickstarter minions all look like, you can see there. So let me get this out of the way. And let's start with the Aloyan deck. I'm going to get these out of screen as well just so the camera doesn't focus on them. Alright, so we're going to open this Aloyan deck first. So we're going to start with an Aegis Knight, an Aegis Wings, an Aetherforge Oracle, a Blightsteel Sentinel, a Scypian Experimentation, an Energy Surge, a Gauntlets of Solgrim, an Orlean Battle Droid, Steel Eye Researcher, and Suppressing Techno Hulk. And then our Forgeborn here is an Ironbeard with Intimidate level 2, Knockback level 3, and Reinforce level 4. So just to kind of take a quick look at the deck. So these are the level 3s of all the cards. So this is a deck that doesn't immediately come out to me and say like, hey, I really want to play this. But there are some cool synergies here that are worth exploring. So obviously something like Aegis Knight, you could deploy to give it additional attack for each creature with armor in play. So this has a couple ways to give your own creatures armor, whether it's your Suppressing Techno Hulk, your Battle Droid, your Bright Steel Sentinel, your Gauntlets of Solgrim. But if your opponent is also playing some cards with armor, this could be potentially really strong as a stealth card. So this could be a little bit of a sleeper in the deck, depending on what you're facing and kind of the way that you draw your hand and what you pair it with. Um, Unfortunately, there's not a ton of minion generation because you don't have a Steel Rosetta to be able to generate minions, but you do have an Energy Surge. So the Steel Eye Researcher will only be valuable if you could kind of pair this with a minion heavy deck. So this would probably go with something green or red and potentially either have a Nova or a Sunder that could make minions if you really want to take advantage of your Steel Eye Researcher. There's really only one piece of removal, which is your gauntlets, but you do have your Aetherforge Oracle, which could help you upgrade cards. You have, let's see how many robots. One, two, three, four. So you got actually four robots in the deck, so you can definitely be able to get some advantage out of the Blight Steel or Bright Steel Sentinel as well. Um, Aegis Wings can be kind of cool if you could upgrade it early and then like use something like Energy Surge to upgrade it and then be able to kind of play it for free the rest of the game. So it's not a bad deck. It's just nothing that when I look at it, I would be like really excited about. And obviously, I said there was one piece of removal, but Suppressing Techno Hulk is also another way to remove creatures in here. So this is an interesting deck. Not one that I would probably play in the near future, but it's one that if I open it in sealed, I would probably be like, oh, cool, an Alliance deck I would actually consider playing. So that is the Aloyan deck out of this card starter kit. So let's get this out of the way. And then let's move on to the Tempest. Alright, so we're going to start with an Arrogant Colossus, an Arrogant Sentinel, Conflagrate, Everflame Aura, Firefist Uranti, Fit of Rage, Fleet Adept, Lightning Tamer, Stampeding Mongosaur, Volcanic Lasher, and our Forgeborn is a Korok with Whirlwind at level 2, Demolish at level 3, and Flame Strike at level 4. So let's put this deck out and see what we got. So this is another deck that's interesting. There are some cool synergies here that you could really look at with the deck itself. So Firefist Uranti is a card that I like a lot. It's a card that I don't see played as often as I would have hoped. But the level 3, where you can activate to deal damage equal to its power to a creature or player, especially if you have ways to pump your own creatures, can be pretty huge. And in this deck, you have obviously Everflame Aura. So if you play your Firefist Uranti, you activate it for 4, you play your Everflame Aura to give it plus 10 attack, give it mobility, and then ready it, and then activate it again, you're basically dealing an additional 10. And if you pair this with a deck that's got other pump spells, you could find some good ways to really get some value out of your Firefist. In terms of spells, we've got the Fit of Rage, which is a good pump card and could be really aggressive, especially if you've played other spells to be able to give it to your whole board. I've definitely won quite a few games off of the back of Fit of Rage. Um, Looking at the deck itself, there's only 3 spells, so your Fleet Adept will to really get advantage out of it, you'd want to be playing another deck that's either spell heavy or has ways to play free spells. So if you had something like a Blight Witch, a Spite Maiden, something paired with a deck like this, your Fleet Adept could be really strong here, because getting a 12/12 with mobility for free after playing a couple spells can be really strong. In terms of Conflagrate, there's only 3 mages in this half, so you'd probably want to pair this with a mage-heavy purple deck to really get the most out of it, because you could Conflagrate, you could Fire Fist, get your removal. And if you're spell slinging, your Sentinel could be really strong as well, because if you play a lot of spells, you'll be able to pump your entire board. I'm not a huge fan of arrogant creatures, though, because their attack stats don't really outweigh the decreased defense stats, especially at level 3, unless you're on Forge or have ways to give breakthrough or things like that. So, like with Fit of Rage, you could have a good turn where you play like your arrogant Sentinel or you have your arrogant Colossus out, and then you pump them all and give them breakthrough, but they're just very easy to remove, and it's hard to get value out of it when someone can kind of come in and just immediately destroy it. Now the Sentinel is better than the Colossus, because at least it gets additional attack and defense when you have spells in your banish pile. Um, you do have a little bit of utility removal with your Stampeding Mongosaur and your Volcanic Lasher, but unfortunately, because Volcanic Lasher has 1 power at level 3, you're only dealing 1 damage to another creature. So, unfortunately, Volcanic Lash is, in my opinion, one of the bad lashers, or not one of the strongest lashers you could get. So again, this is an interesting deck. This is one where if I was playing sealed, I would be pretty happy to open it. But at the same time, I don't know if this would be something I would like seek out to play in constructed. But it's definitely got a lot of synergies. And then obviously Lightning Tamer, if you're playing in a very spell heavy deck, you could like get your spell sprites, spell swarms, and just push a lot more damage when you're spell slinging. So yeah, it's an interesting deck. It doesn't have Sunder, so it doesn't have ways to get free spells. But like it's a pretty aggressive Korok. So if you don't have a good Forgeborn on the other half, you could definitely get some removal and push some damage out of this Korok. All right, so let's move on to the Utera deck. And then each Kickstarter starter will have 1 random Kickstarter minion in one of the decks, in addition to 2 of the Forge cards and 1 of the keyword cards. So every time you open a Kickstarter starter, in addition to having the starter kit minions in that little package I showed before, you'll also have a Kickstarter minion. So this one I opened a Gizmo. All right, so we're going to start with an Armored Rex, a Druid's Chant, a Ferocious Reveler, a Ferocious Roar, a Hibernating Raptor, a Lead the Charge, a Nap Time, Relentless Wanderers, Shroudthorn Splicer, Stouthide Stegodon, and then our Forgeborn is a Nova, with Nova's Might at level 2, Nova's Dominion at level 3, and Nova's Wrath at level 4. So this is actually a pretty interesting deck as well. I know I've said that about the other two, um, but Armored Rex is a great Rex. It's actually one of my favorites out of the different variants of Rex that I've played. Just because having armor on a creature like Rex that's helping you like battle and gain buffs on your other dinos, um, it can make it really resilient. So I have another deck that I ran that was a Dino deck that ran an Armored Rex, and it was just very hard for my opponents to effectively remove, especially when you get to level 3 and it's like every time they have to get past that 6 armor before they could remove it. So unless they have like hard removal or something that gives -X, it's a really strong version of Rex. Now, if you look at the deck itself, there are 2 other dinos, so it's not a super dino heavy deck, but it's got a hibernating raptor and a stout hide stegodon. So I always love stout hide stegodon because it gains you life, especially if you play it unopposed. Or it gains you life if you play it unopposed, which I usually will if I'm playing the card. Plus, having breakthrough on a creature is always strong. Now, speaking of breakthrough, Shroudhorn Splicer is actually a card that I like a lot, and I don't play it enough. But being able to, on cycle 1, play the Splicer to replace one of your creatures with a minion and then destroy itself, the Splicer, it will help trigger stuff like your Shamblers and destruction triggers. And then it levels pretty strongly. Like when you get to level 10, or sorry, level 3, you get a 10/10 with breakthrough, and you could also replace another one of your creatures with an Oakfather. So it just pushes out a lot of damage. Granted, if you're playing something like a Relentless Wanderers, where you could pump out minions and then replace that minion or that the wisp with a Oakfather early, it could really push a lot of damage. Now here, if I'm trying to build a board, put a lot of minions out with Relentless Wanderers, Ferocious Roar could be really strong, especially if I could play it with Ferocious Reveler, because you could play this for free, pump all of your creatures, including your 2/2s or your 8/8s, depending on which minions you're throwing out, and it could just put a lot of pressure on. And then obviously you have cards like Druid's Chant to help buff as well. Now in this deck, there's really only one card you'd really hit with Lead the Charge in this half, which would be the Wanderers, unless you're just looking to buff the defense of one of your creatures. But if you pair this with something that has activated abilities or ways to play free spells, this deck does have ways to kind of push a little bit of damage with your breakthrough cards. You have ways to fight with your Rex. You have ways to pump with your Roar and your Druid's Chant, and then you also have cards like Nap Time, which could help with cards like Rumblespark Elemental to make them lose all their abilities. They gain Defender, it gains you life, and it helps you potentially fight a Rumblespark and get rid of it early in the game. So this is a fun deck. It definitely looks like it could be on the aggressive side. This is one that would probably pair well with if there's a Dino heavy red deck, if there's something that like really fits with some of these additional cards. Like if you have a minion heavy deck that can be in another faction, with the Relentless Wanderers, it could be strong. It's missing probably like one more dinosaur, and it's also missing something like Elysian Rain. So it's kind of like in the middle of a few strategies, but sometimes I like that out of the decks that I open, just because at that point it kind of gives you flexibility to play differently against different decks that you're facing. So this is definitely an interesting one. All right, so then let's go to the last. And one thing I do enjoy about opening Kickstarter, which I'll highlight on the Ferocious Reveler, so for certain creatures like your Betrayers, you can potentially get like a #1 card, and then for something with like a modifier, especially if it's like a rare modifier on a rare card, you could potentially get really low numbered cards. And I know that's just like a collector thing, but I always enjoy getting low number cards at the bottom right hand for the collector numbers. So every time you open Kickstarter, you get opportunities to open some really low cards. And I actually have a deck that's almost all #1s with one #2. So that was just a lot of fun to open because it's like very close to the beginning of the print run for all of Kickstarter, which is like the first decks that were printed for this game. All right, so we got one more deck to go through, and it is the Necrom, which is usually the faction in set 1 that I'm most excited to open. Um, all right, so we're starting with an Abyssal Creeper, a Bone Scythe Reaver, a Combat Apparition, an Epidemic, a Forsaken Ice Crusher. This is a pretty cool betrayer. We'll go into that in a second, though. Hibernating Fiend, Om Nom Nom, Scourge Hydra, Venerable Drake, Varric's Embrace, and then our Forgeborn is a Cersei with Life Drain at level 2, Army Commander at level 3, and Soul Siphon at level 4. Alright. All right, so for this deck, the first thing I notice is that there are two dinosaurs in this for a Necrom half. So this is one of those things where you could kind of pair this with a Dino deck. So if I open this as my sealed pool and I saw that I had an Armored Rex and I had a deck with two dinosaurs in it, this is probably the deck that I would pair with it, just so I could really get a lot of benefit out of that Rex. But let's start with the Forsaken Ice Crusher. So having an aggressive creature that can basically get additional power and toughness or attack and defense when it's unopposed, you can really push a lot of damage by surprise with a deck like this or with a card like this. Just because at this point you're getting a 15, 13, basically aggressive if you on off forge second play do this in an unopposed lane to really push damage. So that's just like a nice little potential finisher here. If you play it with a Rex, you could give it +5/+5, I think is what the level 3 Rex does. And that can just push a lot more damage and really potentially win you the game. But from a removal side, Nom Nom's always a great card because being able to remove one of their creatures and get a minion just gives you like a 2-for-1, which always feels nice no matter what game you play. Um, there is one way here, which is the combat apparition to destroy really your own creatures. So if I play the combat apparition, destroy one of my creatures on the board to buff this, and then play something like Scourge Hydra, I could then destroy another creature. So it's another way to kind of destroy my own creatures to activate other cards in my deck. So that's a second removal card that can be helpful. Varric's Embrace is always one of my favorite cards to have as removal in purple because being able to gain life and deal damage to a creature can really help you recover and kind of stabilize when you're playing a long game. Um, Hibernating Fiend is definitely interesting because being able to either destroy your Fiend with the combat apparition or chump block it to give one of your other creatures +X/+X, so +6/+6 at level 3 can be really strong because it just really makes your opponent not want to kill it as much because as long as you don't have an empty board, you're going to be able to pump one of your other creatures. Now, in terms of beasts, there are only three in this one, which is not a horrible number, but there's no real beast synergy. But it's always nice to have that beast synergy when you are running the Necrom halves because there are some really strong beast cards on Necrom. But Abyssal Creeper is an interesting one. It's again not my favorite modifier for Creeper, but Creeper is a great card because it's either going to remove something on the board or take some damage away. And then if you play it at the end of the cycle because it's Abyssal, you'll be able to have them destroy one of their creatures as well. So it's like pseudo removal, but a lot of times an Abyssal card will be killed before the end of the cycle, or sometimes you'll have better cards in your hand to play where you're really only getting value at the end of cycle 1, cycle 2, or cycle 3. So there's three opportunities to really take advantage of that ability. So it's an okay one. It's something that if I have it on a good card, I'll happily play it. But in this situation, like Creeper is a good enough card where I'll play the Creeper to deal the damage or remove something, and then I'll be able to remove something else. So off Forge, it could be kind of a nice little trap. Bone Scythe Reaver is a great card. It's something that I wish said destroy a level any creature at level 3 instead of just a level 1 or 2. But at the same time, it's still a 10/7 that is it scales pretty well for levels 1, 2, and 3. So it could help push damage, help remove some creatures early, and you're not removing their biggest threats with it, but it could help set up something like an Abyssal um, or like help just remove one of the creatures on the board so you stay alive and can still push damage. Epidemic is a card that I like, but I rarely play. It's unfortunate because the level 1 Epidemic, a lot of times will not be advantageous to play unless you're really playing against something minion based. If I could play it in a deck with has something like Army Commander where I could upgrade it and play it if I need to. So if my opponent wipes my board or if they have a crazy board state where it's just I know that I'm gonna die if I can't kind of reset, Epidemic is a great card because not only does it kind of remove health like it would on a Firestorm, but removing attack could really help you stabilize. But you don't want to play an Epidemic when you have a full board. So it's like it's a great safety valve. In certain matchups, it's going to be your friend, but it's just a card that sometimes works for you, sometimes doesn't. So this is an interesting deck, and if I were to play sealed in this matchup, just right off the bat, I would probably pair this with the green deck, just so I could try to have some fun with the dinos, having two dinosaurs in this purple half. But overall, like this was definitely a pretty solid Kickstarter kit. It was a lot of fun to open, and I hope to be opening some more Kickstarter sets really soon. I'm sorry that it's been a while since I've done any deck openings, but I'll plan to do more as we get closer to Worlds and kind of as the meta continues to develop on the competitive scene. So thank you for tuning in. I hope to be streaming a lot more on my Twitch now that I'm a little bit more free because the last few weeks I've been really busy. But yeah, thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you guys next time.